Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Player First podcast with Coach Fernando, who is the founder of Tiempo Soccer Academy, based all the way in New York, USA. And myself, Coach Leo, also known as Leonardo, who is the owner and founder of the Football Domain Academy, based in London. So if this is the first time you're watching this podcast, welcome to the show. Now, the purpose behind what we are doing with Coach Fernando is we are on a mission to impact, to reach, and to help educate 1 million club soccer / football players from across the globe. So wherever you are in the world, we want to reach you, we want to help you, and we want to help you to get to the next level. So, Coach Fernando, welcome back to another episode.
Love it. I love it. Leo, Coach Leo, you're getting better yourself at these intros, my man. I know it's taking you a couple tries, but you're getting to my level. We're climbing together.
Yeah. I think you always get it after the first one. It takes me about 3 or 4.
That's why we're getting there. But no, it's great to be back. Just like Coach Leo said, our mission is to help educate players around the globe, especially players that have maybe some higher aspirations, right? So, Coach Leo, I'm going to introduce our topic for today, and then you can go into it. So, I know we wanted to specifically get into talking about preventing injuries and how players can help themselves prevent injuries.
Very important topic.
Yeah. Not all injuries you can prevent, right? Some things are just, things happen on the field that you can't control. Yeah. But there are still a lot of things that you can do to help yourself prevent injuries, specifically non-contact injuries, right? Like muscle pulls and things like that. But we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So, Coach Leo, what is your what's your experience been with?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a history of injuries, but now it's never been anything major. So I've never torn anything or been out for a very long time. But I've always had little injuries, such as I've twisted my ankle, or I pulled my hamstring, or some sort of injury of that sort. Now, the problem I used to have was I was never really educated by my coaches on how to prevent those types of injuries. And something I've noticed, especially as I've aged, is that, but we can't say the age.
Well, we don't want you to know how old, a 50-year-old looks like. So.
That's it. Yeah. Guess my age in the comments.
Oh man, they'll never get it.
But anyway, going back to the topic. So as I started to age and I started to play at the adult level, something I found was preparation in terms of injury prevention was really important. And it's vitally important because obviously when you play at the adult level, you have to be careful because obviously I coach full time. So I have to make sure I'm preventing any type of injuries, because if not, I won't be able to coach and I won't be able to work. So my love, shall we say, for the topic has grown as I've got older. When I was younger, I would get injured, but I would maybe take one day off and then I'll be back on the field.
Right.
Now, the problem with that is you don't really recover properly, and you don't give your body that rest really that it needs to then operate fully, because you're young, because you think that injuries will never really affect you as you get older. So yeah, like my experience with injuries hasn't been one, as I said, I've never had a major one.
Right.
But I've always had like little niggles and stuff like that over time, I've noticed that it does affect you. So the purpose behind what we want to do is to provide you with a very basic understanding of how to avoid injuries without getting into too technical or too scientific with you.
Right. Exactly. 100%. And, unlike your experiences with injuries, I've experienced 2 major injuries when I was younger. I broke my femur, which is the bone in your thigh.
Yeah.
And it's actually the biggest bone in your body.
Cool.
And so that's a really major injury.
Yeah.
I was just about to enter high school when that happened. And then I had another major injury in high school. I tore my ACL in my right knee, which is a ligament. Very important for you to be able to cut and to move in your knee. So I had those two major injuries. So I'm really passionate about this topic. So I'm really passionate about helping players prevent injuries. And I've been doing a lot of educating myself on the topic over the past several years, just because I wanted to make sure that I didn't re-injure myself, because I know once you tear an ACL, it becomes more likely to do it again. So I did my best to make sure I educated myself so I don't injure myself again when I play with my friends, or if I play in an adult league or whatever it is. It's like you, if I get injured, I can't work, I can't coach. So I'm super, I'm aware of being able to do the things that I need to do to prevent injuries for myself. So I do that, and I pass that along to my players as best as I can. But like Coach Leo said, we're going to provide you guys with a basic understanding that'll help with sort of preventing those injuries.
Fantastic. So to begin with, so when you were playing, so put yourself in the position of a 13, 14, maybe 15-year-old player. What were some things that your coach taught you about injury prevention?
Nothing. Nothing. I didn't get a lot of education on it when I was a club player. And so that's where I identify with you. I'm very much interested in the topic because I did get injured. I had to learn about preventing them. So I didn't get a lot of education when I was that age, but I think now you and I have both learned a little something that we can share with our players. So, I mean, like you said, you didn't either really get any education when you were that age, right?
No, 100% not. Because it was all about, I don't know, it might have been, I was never really coached by a great coach. But it was literally just turn up, run a lap, put on a bib, and get out onto the pitch.
Right. There was no system or idea of helping the players prepare.
Yeah. So for all those American viewers, a bib is a penny.
You're right. We always got to remember those differences.
That's it. And that was the session. It was one lap, then everyone to their own, sort of doing their stretching, and then we go straight into a game. And that's what we do really. Right. And after that, there was no cool down. There was no talk from our coach to say, listen, when you get home, make sure you stretch some more, or make sure you, eat some specific food to help with your recovery. None of that. Now, I think the game has obviously evolved since then, and there has been more focus on injury prevention, just because it's very common, especially like ACL injuries.
Yes, it's super common.
So it's if you're a coach watching, definitely educate your players on it, because that can be the difference between a player getting to the next level or a player getting an injury and then not being able to play again.
100%. Injuries are a part of the game. And like we mentioned, some injuries you're not going to be able to stop, right? If someone comes in on a hard tackle and they twist your ankle, there's nothing really you can do about that. But there are ways to prevent other types of injuries that are non-contact. Like you said, a lot of ACL injuries are very common for the high school age players, especially for the female players that are out there watching. If you're in high school, you're a female player, it's so important that you strength train and get stronger, because you don't build up the muscle as easily as the boys in that age. And that's something we could get into a little more.
Yeah.
So I guess what's the first strategy that we want to talk about here to help our players? Coach Leo, what do you think? I think we've talked about, was it strength training, right?
Yep. So we talked a bit about strength training. Now, I think the most important thing, obviously, before any game or any sort of major event, training session, whatever, I think the most important thing we start off talking about is the warm-up, right? So on the field, we'll talk about the warm-up, like its importance. And this goes really hand in hand with our previous episode about being prepared, being overly prepared, right? Because if you're showing up on time, okay, that gives you time to avoid an injury by warming up.
Right.
So as a player, the first step I would say is always make sure you show up on time or early enough to every event, whether that be training or games, so that you can get that 15 to 20 minutes of proper warm up that you need in order to prepare yourself properly, which can then avoid an injury during a game.
Yes, 100%. 100%. That's definitely step number one. If you want to break it down to a really easy step that players can do is, if you're in that teenage range, you need to be warming up 100%. You need to have some type of warm up to prepare your body. And to take it a step further, it's important not to just have any old warm up. Like you said with your coaches, they would just say, go take a lap.
Yeah.
Right. Which is good to get your body moving, but there's certain things that you want to do that make sure you get your body prepared as well. But step number one for sure, warm up. You have to arrive to warm up. You can't skip that part.
Yeah. So what type of warm-ups would you recommend kids doing then? Kids or young players, if they're watching this?
Yeah. So when it comes to the warm-up, I think there's you definitely want to stretch, but you don't want to stretch in maybe the traditional way that you think about stretching, where like you just lean over and touch your toes, or do something where you're just standing around. Yeah. So there's two kind of methods to stretching. There's dynamic stretching, and then there's static stretching. And so the dynamic just means that you're moving, that your body's on the move, the muscles are activated. You're not standing and just trying to stretch that muscle. Okay. It's almost like a rubber band. If you arrive to the field and you're just standing there trying to stretch, it's like trying to pull a cold rubber band. Yeah. Right. Like, let's say you put a rubber band in the fridge or the freezer and you take it out and you pull it. What's going to happen is you're actually going to start breaking that rubber band. So instead, you have to warm up muscle, right, by moving as you stretch. So the first thing I would do is look into dynamic stretching. Okay, just look it up, Google it, find some good resources about dynamic stretching. That's the type of stretching that you want to do before activity. Yeah. Okay, so that's the first thing I would look at is dynamic stretching.
Yeah, cool, like it. Yeah. Something I like to do with my players is all my warm-ups are usually with a ball. So it'd be some dribbling, changing direction with the ball, doing maybe a step over, some sort of ball mastery work to begin with, always, like without fail. That's like my favorite warm-up. Keeps them concentrated, believe it or not, but it does warm you up, you know. Yeah. And then after that, we leave the ball and then we go into what you just talked about, dynamic stretching.
I like that. Yeah.
Very simple.
And I think it could be different for different ages, right? Like different ages. So certain ages, as you get older, you need the dynamic stretching more. You need more of that stuff as your body matures. Yeah. But if you're a younger player or a parent of a younger player watching, they may not need as much time to do like the dynamic type of stretching. They may need more time with the ball, like you say, right? So it depends on the player and their individual needs and where they are. But typically, if I'm talking about the older players, I like to do it without the ball first. They come, they jog, they backpedal, side shuffle, some Frankenstein kicks, some stretches that we do on the move.
Yeah.
And then after that, then we get into the ball, some one-touch passing and a little possession play, things like that. But I think it depends on the player as well and the ages.
Yeah. So yeah, the warm up should always be, I think, in my personal opinion, it should always be in movement.
Yes.
And always focused on like agility work. So always moving, changing direction, changing speed.
Yes.
And obviously, as we just said, dynamic stretching.
Yes.
So moving on from that now, because I know some.
Coach Leo, let me just add a piece. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add one little thing too to consider as you still get older too is the technique of jumping and landing.
Yes.
A lot of injuries happen because players don't know how to land correctly, softly, with good technique. And so they put a lot of pressure on their joints. So part of our dynamic warm-up too with my older players is to have a jumping and landing element where they literally will just they'll do skips, they'll literally do skips because they're literally jumping and landing very little.
Yeah.
And then they'll try to hop from one foot to the other, and they'll just focus on landing very softly, getting those muscles ready for jumping and landing. Because in the game, you're going to sometimes have to jump, maybe for a header or a ball in the air or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You want to be able to come down in a safe position.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good you touched on that, because it's like the warm-up should always focus on game-specific movements.
Yes,
So
exactly.
Jumping, 100% important. So really, really, really good point you made. Thank you.
And just like you,
Fernando.
Just like you mentioned, also the cutting, the changing directions, right, with the ball. That's a game-specific movement. You're going to do that a bunch of times in the game.
Yeah.
So that's something that you should prepare the body for. Jumping, landing, cutting, changing directions, changing speeds, sprinting, slowing down, whatever you need to do. Think about how it relates to the game.
Yeah. Cool. Now, something I want to touch on as well now, moving on. So we've arrived at the game. We've done our warm-up. Now, I know another area where a lot of players suffer from injuries is half-time. Okay, so you're out on the field, you're obviously focused, you're running, you're hot. And then once we get into the half-time, depending how long the half-time is, if it's about 15 minutes or so, your body starts to get cold again. So I know personally as a coach that has coached many teams, I've had a lot of players that have suffered injuries after half-time. So they've come into the halftime. We've had our talk. They haven't done anything for 10 minutes. They've even sat down, talked to their teammates, get back out in the field. First time they run for the ball, they pull something.
Yeah.
So what would you advise for a player watching that is going into the halftime team talk with their coach? What should they be looking to do in order to prevent an injury from happening once they get back onto the field for the second half?
Right. That's a really good question. So it's funny how you say how long, depending on how long the half is. Over here in the league, in this area that a lot of the players play in, the halftime is like 5 minutes. It's like this.
Yeah.
To me, it's too short. They don't give the players enough time to rest a little bit. But with a longer halftime, like you say, 10, 15 minutes, if you have that time, that's great. You should definitely take the first 5 to 10 minutes to listen to your coach, listen to the adjustments, right? Hydrate, relax for a little bit.
Yeah.
But those last 5 minutes, when you know you're about to get on the field again, you should start moving again. Move your body. Just simple. Just jog a little bit, backpedal a little bit, maybe a little bit of the dynamic stretching again. You almost want to do like that mini warm-up all over again. Just a little mini version of it. Not too intensely, just a little bit so you get the body moving. If you watch the professionals play, right, when they come back out on the field for the second half, you'll see them like jumping around or twisting their hips a little bit, or just getting their body loose again right before that whistle blows. Okay, so they don't just walk out there and then they just go at 100. They sort of move their body just a little bit just to wake the muscles back up. So that way, like you said, you don't pull something right away.
Yeah. Awesome. Good advice there. All right, so we've talked about the halftime. Before we go on to talking about what to do off the field, so away from your training session,
right.
Now the cool down, something that at the club level, especially youth level, coaches focus a lot on the warm up, but never the cool down.
100%. That's 100%.
Never the cool down. It's like team talk. You can go now.
Yeah. That's 100% right. And it's funny because I took my team, this was like last year, I think, to a professional women's game to watch them play. And we stayed after because they were signing autographs and things like that, which was awesome. But before any of that happened, the whole team, both teams were out on the field cooling down, stretching for like 10 minutes. They just did a quick 5-10 minute cool down. And, I was showing my players, like, this is the importance of the cool down. Because after your match, you still want to be able to stretch, to have those muscles relax a little bit, because they're going to get tight. Right. So if you stretch after a full match, it's going to help the muscles recover easier if you stretch right away, if you have that cool down. But you're right, there's a lot of clubs, programs, coaches, they don't focus on that part. They just have their quick team talk after and then see you later. But I think it's important, if your team doesn't have a cool down, as a player, stay on the field 5-10 minutes, just 5-10 minutes. And this is where you focus on we talked about the dynamic stretching. This is where you focus on the static stretching. And static just means you're still, right? You're not moving, right? So the warm up is all about movement. The cool down is just about stretching at a standstill. All right. So really focus on stretching the muscles. So that's more of your traditional types of stretches that you think about.
Yeah. 100%. And like I said, you could probably count it. If you go to a tournament, you could probably count it in one hand, the amount of coaches that actually do cool downs.
Yeah, for sure.
And a tournament is more important than anywhere, because it's like you might have one game early and then you have a big break and then another game. And that is really difficult to then get back into the rhythm.
Yes. That's where this cool down warm up process is even more important.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm still very bad at the cool down. Not with my players, but personally when I play.
Yeah. It's because it's something that you don't think about. It's like the game's over, I'm going to go home, right? You don't think about it, but it is important. It does help your muscles recover. And those little differences, they add up over time. It's not like you'll get injured the next game, but over a season or over some time, it could lead to problems.
Yeah. You think about it the morning after. when you can't move.
Oh, I'm so tight. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You don't feel it right then. And if you're a coach watching this, or a parent, let me talk to the coaches. If you're a coach watching this, have your team talk as part of the cool down process. So don't be afraid to let your players stretch. Maybe you want to build a routine for them at first, so they have some ideas of how to stretch. And obviously you want to educate yourself as a coach. So you teach them to stretch properly, and have your team talk while they do the stretches. There's nothing wrong with players trying to focus two things at once. I know it may be annoying for the coaches, like I'm talking to people while they're stretching, but at least you're having some cool down process.
Yeah. That's awesome. Okay, perfect. So now we've talked through how to prevent an injury during a game. Correct. Now we want to talk a bit about away from the field. So away from training sessions, away from games, what are some things that you can do to help your body avoid injuries when you get to that field?
Yeah, so I think we like just touched on it very briefly, but the most important thing that any therapist or sports physiologist will tell you is strength training.
Yeah.
Strength training, strength training, strength training.
Yeah.
So this is something that players need to be doing, like you said, away from their field, away from the teams. They should be training on their strength, getting stronger. If you are stronger, you're just less likely to have those non-contact injuries.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you do have even like those contact injuries that you can't prevent, you're going to be able to recover quicker because your body's stronger.
Yeah.
Right. So strength training is the number one thing you should be doing away from the field.
Yeah. What ages would you say to begin strength training?
That's a really great question. So I think there's no correct answer. I think it's just about how players think and how parents and players think about strength training. So strength training doesn't have to be like weights and you know, anything, equipment. Like we don't need all of that fancy stuff, especially for the young kids, or if you're just starting your strength training. You don't need to have weights and equipment. You just need your body and you need proper form and technique.
Yeah.
So even the young ones, they can do basic body movements that are considered strength training. So I don't think there's a right age, but I do definitely think by the time teenage years comes, they should definitely already be strength training.
Yeah.
By the time you hit the teenage years, you should be doing some type of strength training. Before that, hopefully you have a little bit of knowledge or a little bit of experience, because that'll help you be better as you age.
Yeah. So I've got a personal experience with strength training. Now this comes back to when I talked about how I was never really educated as a player about avoiding injuries and just game preparation. You know, after a game, we'd all just go to McDonald's.
Right.
Sometimes even before the game.
Right.
So there was no real professionalism in what we were doing. So, but anyway, that is a different topic.
Yeah, that's a different.
But going back to strength training, something I suffered always was when I went to the gym. So I'd say around when I got to 16, 17, and I started to strength train, which is quite late, right? Quite late.
It's okay. It's not terrible. I mean, I'd rather them start with the weights and stuff by like 15, 16 is okay, I think.
Okay.
It depends on the kid, though. You know, it depends on their body.
Yeah. So something I used to always suffer with is hamstring injuries. And one of the reasons for this was because I was never taught how to train both muscle groups. So if you're training your hamstring, it's important to train also the muscle that works with the hamstring, which would be the quad. So for maybe 2 years, all I used to do was quad, like training my quads. So I had really strong quads, and then I used to always pull my hamstring. So what would you recommend as a coach to prevent that injury, which I know a lot of people do suffer with?
Yes.
But it's mainly because of just misinformation.
Yes, 100%. So I think that's a common issue. I actually had a player like a year ago. She pulled her hamstring in the game. She pulled her hamstring. You could just see it. She just started running and something just popped, and that's it. She couldn't.
Yeah.
It was terrible. But you're right. It's because, you know, a lot of players aren't educated on training both sides of the muscles or muscle groups that work together, right? Because the last thing you want to do is create an imbalance. Yeah. And all that means is that you're just working out one side or one muscle group and it's super strong, but then the other side is not. And so that imbalance eventually will lead to some type of injury, like in your case, those hamstring injuries.
Yeah.
So it's important to make sure you're, number one, training in a balance, right? Whatever you do with one muscle group, the front of the leg, for example, with the quads, right? You should train just as much or just as intensely with the hamstrings.
Yeah.
Right? So that way you have that balance throughout your leg, just as an example. I think that's the number one thing.
Yeah, yeah. Love that, love that. For me personally, it was because as I was training my quads, I felt, I thought that I was training my hamstring as well.
Right, right.
So that goes back to a lack of knowing something.
Yes, exactly. That's not your fault. You should have a coach helping you with that, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes you can train them together, like really good exercise for your legs, and a basic one that all players should be able to do, and even the young ones should start doing, is squats.
Oof, the dreaded squats.
The squat. That is probably the best exercise. If there's no other exercise that a soccer player could do, that's probably the one that you definitely want to do, is squats. For a number of reasons. It works out everything, even from your core, from your abs down. So it's such a good exercise that players of all levels can master, because you just need to start with your body. You don't need to start with, like I said, no equipment, no weight. But the real key is doing it with proper form. Yeah. Doing it with proper form, doing it the right way, teaching players how to do it the right way. Because you can squat, but if you're doing it improperly, then that's going to lead to an injury because you're not doing it right. You're probably putting tension on your joints or on your knees. You're not doing something right. And if you do that over time, that doing the squat wrong is going to lead to an injury. Yeah. So it's important that players, when they strength train, they focus on doing it the right way. Good form, good technique. Yeah. Before you think about any types of weights, you need to master the form, master it, become a perfectionist with the form. Yeah, yeah. It's a very valid point, because it's the same way you have to master your technique as a player. You've got to master your training. Your body. You got to master your body. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, it's a great point. And technique is another area where we people of all ages, I mean, you go to a gym and you'll see some crazy stuff. You see some crazy techniques, and that's because what tends to happen is we observe each other when we're in the gym, and then we just sort of copy someone's technique, right? Right. Instead of actually looking for maybe a trainer that works in the gym that can help you. So it's taking responsibility as well. Right. Because it's easier, all right, he's doing it that way, so it must be the right way. But reality is that can cause an injury because you're probably doing it wrong. Right. And yeah, we could be here all day talking about some horrendous techniques in the gym. Right. It's true. And you'll see it at every single gym. Every time you'll see somebody doing something kind of wacky, kind of crazy, and you're just like, what is going on? But that's a really good point too, though. You want to make sure, as a parent, as a player, you are getting correct information. You're not getting misinformation. Yeah. And what I would advise to parents and players is don't rely on one source, right? First, you should seek to educate from various sources. Yeah. And you start to pick up the patterns of, okay, this is the correct form. This is the right way. Yeah. And you start to learn for yourself what is correct, what is not correct. And then when you find someone that can help you, that you know, okay, they know what they're talking about, let them help you, right? Let them guide you. Yeah. But it's important that you have that correct information for sure. Yeah. Awesome. Love it. Okay, Coach Fernando, fantastic knowledge from yourself. Especially a man that's gone through many injuries in the past. Yes, man, that's exactly that's exactly why I've been so passionate about it, because I've gone through it myself, and injuries are horrible. I mean, I remember when I like I said, when I broke my femur, I remember in the emergency room that day, I was bawling, crying, bawling. And my mom's like, "What's wrong? Are you in pain? Like, what's going on?" Like, I'm like, "No, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to play again."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, because I broke the biggest bone in your body. When you hear that, you're just like, "Oh my God, can I play again?"
Yeah.
Um, Luckily, I was able to come back months later, but I'm so passionate about making sure players stay as safe as possible,
Yeah.
because I know how terrible injuries are. They suck.
Yeah.
They suck. You don't want to get injured.
Yeah.
So I've been doing a lot of educating since I was a young one about injuries. So
Yeah.
it's a really passionate topic of mine.
Yeah. I'd say maybe about 3 weeks ago as well. I played 5-a-side on Thursdays, and 3 weeks ago as well, while playing, I pulled my hamstring. And this was like 10 minutes into the game, and it's horrendous. It's like you can't do anything.
No, once
Like
you pull a hamstring, forget it. Yeah.
like you can't run, you can't pass. Your mind is just not in the game. You just feel useless.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you can find a way to prevent that, then you'll be an asset to your team. And ultimately, like I said at the beginning, an injury can be the difference between you getting to the next level or you not playing ever again.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And that's how sometimes players miss their opportunities when they get hurt, right? They sort of fall out of the first team, and someone sort of comes in and takes advantage, and they take their place, and things never end up being the same.
Yeah.
So you're 100% right. It could be the difference. It could definitely be the difference.
Yeah. So, okay, perfect. So as we begin to wrap up, Coach Fernando, thank you very much again. Great. I thoroughly enjoyed learning from you. As
No, me
always.
too, man. Me too. These are always good. These are always good. We learn from each other, so it's good.
Exactly. So if you want to connect with either Fernando or myself, at the bottom of this video or at the top, depends where you're watching it.
Somewhere.
Somewhere we're gonna put all our social links, so you can drop us a question, you can follow our academy, see what we do, because we're always here to help, to answer questions you may have, and also if you're interested in appearing on the show as well, we're always looking for guests as well. So
yeah, something we're going to start talking about coming up sometime.
So perfect. All right, Coach Fernando, what's the week looking for you next week?
Yeah, so this is the last week coming up here before the kids actually go to school and before the schools reopen. So for those that are interested, maybe in the UK, what's going on here in the US, schools here in New York will be reopening on at least in my area, it's going to be on a hybrid model.
Yeah.
Some days they're going to be in the building, half of them, and then the other half are going to be online, and they're going to switch and rotate. So that's going to be starting the first week of September. So that's coming up soon. Yeah. So next week is our last summer week to train, and then we're going to go into a fall schedule.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What about you? How's everything over there in London? What do you got coming up?
Yeah, in terms of the Football Domain Academy, we are on our summer break at the moment.
Nice.
We recommence training on September the 3rd, and we have a U12 team that we put together that had their first game on September the 6th.
Nice.
So I'm quite excited for that group, because it's going to be our first academy team in an official league. So it's going to be quite fun. But yeah, in terms of schools start again in September. So first week of September, it's mandatory, so everyone has to go in.
Here it's optional. Parents can choose to stay at home. Well, the kids can choose to stay virtual.
Yeah, no, not here. Parents get fined if they don't take their kids back.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. But excellent. All right, Coach Fernando, pleasure as always, and I'll see you next week.
Yes, sir. Pleasure is mine, Coach Leo. I'll catch you next week.
Take care.
See ya.